Hello everyone, my name is Anitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at the Classic Collection, and the Classic Collection adds lots of new and powerful tools to build some really powerful and exciting decks with, or update and iterate on some current and existing decks. So today's deck that I'm going to be touching up on is going to be the Greymon Tribal deck. So in case you're unfamiliar with what the word tribal means, basically it's slang that originates from MTG, basically equivalating to synergy centered around a particular archetype or a particular type of card. So in this case, it's going to be centered around, well, Greymon. So we have lots of different Greymon-based cards that we could be using, and we have lots of new and powerful tools, not only just from this set, but from the previous sets, to work on to build lots of various different iterations on what this deck can possibly do, depending on what your mega lineup is going to look like and what level 7s you want to be incorporating, if any at all. So this is a very flexible deck that you could be utilizing and building to your liking, and well, this is just my interpretation of what the deck is going to look like, or a possible version of what the deck could look like. So without further ado, onto the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Koromon. So Koromon is one of the best Digitamas that we could be playing around with for this style of deck because, well, it's interacting with Greymons and it's acting as a really solid card draw engine for the deck. So what this card is doing is it has a nice inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn, if this Digimon has Omnimon or Greymon in its name, then you get to draw 1 card. So literally just for swinging with your Greymons means you're going to be drawing cards, and drawing cards helps with the deck's overall consistency, allowing you to try to see the cards that you're looking for, making this just one of the best Digitamas we could be using. As far as the 5th Digitama of the deck, I'm just going to be running 1 copy of DemiMeramon. This could really be anything you want it to be, but the whole idea of this type of a Digitama is just to DP boost our Digimon, and there's no easier way to DP boost it than with this card, because he has this nice, powerful, inheritable ability of when attacking. When this Digimon attacks a player, then it gets plus 1000 DP for the turn, so you could utilize this card to just try to give your Digimon some extra DP to ensure that it's going to live through the security check that you're going to try to do onto the opponent. Next, onto the rookies, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT01 version of Agumon, and this Agumon is really good for the deck because we have some very important Tamer cards we want to try to dig out, and, well, this is one of the best ways that we could dig out those Tamers. So it has the nice on-play ability where we get to check the top 5 cards of our deck, and then add any Tamer not limited to color among them into your hand, and then you get to place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is just trying to, again, find your Tamers so that way you could try to set up your Tamers as easily and consistently as you possibly can, because our Tamers are kind of important for how this deck wants to run. And speaking of Tamer-based synergies, next I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT06 version of Agumon, and this Agumon is really good because he has a main ability native to him, where during all turns, once per turn, when you play a Tamer with Tai Kamiya in its name, then you get to gain 1 memory. So it just makes the act of playing your Tais that much more efficient than any other Tamer, so it's just a really good card to allow you to try to play your Tamers as efficiently as you possibly can. Then he also has another upside, where during your turn as an inheritable ability, while this Digimon is Agumon Bond of Bravery, then it also gets Security Tech +1, allowing your Bond of Bravery to hit even harder than he normally would. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the Classic Collection version of Agumon, and this Agumon is really good because, again, it's interacting with how the deck wants to flow and function, utilizing our Tamers in very particular ways. So this is just another way to try to dig out your Tamers because he has this inheritable ability that states when attacking once per turn, you get to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck and add 1 Tamer card or 1 Digimon card with Agumon in its name from among them into your hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So even though this is only searching for Tamers and Agumons, there's still just lots of Tamers and Agumons we could use with this card to make it just a very good card to be using for the deck, and can help with the overall consistency of the deck. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Agumon. So this Agumon is really, really powerful for the deck coming from the Gallantmon starter deck because it's just one of the best and strongest ways we could DP boost our Digimon to ensure it's going to be as strong as it possibly can be. So it has this nice, powerful, inheritable ability that's acting very similar to DemiMeramon, where it's a when attacking ability where when your Digimon is attacking a player, it'll get plus 2000 DP for the turn. So this is just a really good and easy way to try to make our Digimon as strong as they possibly can when we're attacking into the opponent's security, which we're going to have lots of very easy ways to do. And pair this up with DemiMeramon means that it's going to be a plus 3000 DP boost on top of any other DP boosts you could run to try to make your cards as strong as you possibly can. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Greymon. So this is the BT05 version of Greymon, and this Greymon is one of the best cards that we have to be interacting with the deck because of all of its native synergy with the deck. So what this Greymon is doing is it has a nice when digivolving ability, where if this Digimon digivolves on top of an Agumon, then you get to gain 1 memory. So basically it's a card that has Greymon in its name that's evoing for 1, even though yes, you are getting the memory back, and you do have to watch out for the opponent if they have any memory blocking Digimon, but regardless, just the prospect of allowing you to evo into this card relatively easily and efficiently just makes it a really good card to be using, especially since it has a nice inheritable ability on top of that, where during your turn, while this Digimon has Omnimon or Greymon in its name, then it gets plus 2000 DP, making your Digimon even stronger than they normally would be. So it's just a good card to use overall because of all of those synergies. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Monochromon. So Monochromon is another really good card for the deck. Even though it's not a Greymon, it's still important to sometimes have some form of defense in the deck. So this is just using the deck's dedicated blocker slots to, well, be a blocker. If you wanted to, you could easily run Koromon in its place. It doesn't necessarily matter. Sometimes you do just want to run either a stronger blocker or, depending on the deck, a more tempo efficient card because he has this nice evolution requirement where he evos for 1 instead of 2, unlike a lot of our other champions, making him just a very easy Digimon to digivolve into and thus digivolve past. Next up, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Greymon. So this is the Greymon that comes in the Classic Collection, and this Greymon is another really good Greymon to interact with our Tamers. So what this Greymon is doing is it has a nice when attacking ability as an inheritable ability, where once per turn, you may play 1 Tai Kamiya with a play cost of 3 or less from your hand for free. So we do have a couple of different Tai Kamiyas that we could be playing with this card, and well, this card just makes playing those ties that much more efficient and easy to use because we want to set up our ties the best that we could possibly do it with spending as little resources as we possibly can, so that way we could use our ties in various different ways depending on your build and depending on the situations you're going to be coming up against. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Greymon. So this Greymon comes from the Gaia Force starter deck, and well, this Greymon is still just that good of a card to run for basically any red deck, and this deck is, well, no exception, on top of the fact that, well, it has Greymon in its name. So what this card is doing that's so good is the fact that it has a nice inheritable ability where whatever Digimon you're digivolving on top of this card will just have security attack +1, allowing you to deal even more damage and put more pressure onto the opponent, so that way you could try to end games faster. So this is just a very powerful card to be using still, just because the inheritable ability is just that good. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of MetalGreymon Alterous mode. So MetalGreymon Alterous mode is a really powerful card to be playing with. Yes, he does have some Greymon synergy that we're going to be trying to take advantage of. So he evos for 3 off of a level 4, and he evos for 1 on top of a level 5, and sometimes you just want to use him on top of himself or our other level 5, so that way we could utilize his when digivolving ability, where when digivolving, if a Digimon with MetalGreymon in its name is in this Digimon's Digivolution source, then you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less, just adding some extra removal elements in the deck to try to deal with the opponent's low-level Digimon is a really good ability to be playing around with. And then on top of that, it has a nice other ability as an inheritable ability, where during your turn, while this Digimon has Omnimon or Greymon in its name, then it gets plus 2000 DP, acting as yet again another DP boost to try to make your Digimon as strong as you could possibly make them, as long as they're an Omnimon or a Greymon. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of MetalGreymon. So this is the Classic Collection version of MetalGreymon, and this MetalGreymon is, well, another really powerful card to be playing around with, and even though its setup and synergies are a little bit more limited, it's still just a very good card to use when you actually can use it. So what this card is doing is it has a really powerful ability native to him, where when attacking, when this Digimon attacks a player, then you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP DP or less. So it's acting as some more removal similar to Alterous mode, and you could use this in combination with Alterous mode to swing deleted Digimon, then Digivolve on top of it if this MetalGreymon lived, to then try to delete another Digimon. So it's just a really good card to try to pick apart the opponent's low-level Digimon with, comboed with Alterous mode. Even though its inheritable ability isn't affecting Alterous mode, it's still just a possible combo playline that you could utilize. And then on top of that, what you're actually trying to utilize the card for is its inheritable ability, where during your turn, while this Digimon has Machine or Dragonkin in its traits, then it gains the Piercing ability. So the Piercing ability is just a very powerful keyword to be playing around with because, well, it's allowing you to actually deal consistent damage onto the opponent whether they have a blocker or not. If they do have a blocker, it definitely de-incentivizes the opponent from wanting to use that blocker because otherwise they're going to lose that blocker and still take the damage. So it's just a very easy way to ensure that you're going to be dealing damage onto the opponent's security. Onto the Megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of WarGreymon. So this is the BT01 WarGreymon, and yes, all of the WarGreymons are Dragonkins, so the WarGreymons are just the easiest cards to make sure that we could use the piercing ability off of the MetalGreymon that we just saw from the Classic Collection, and there is almost no better WarGreymon to use in the game than this WarGreymon because of its 2 powerful abilities. So its first ability is a when Digivolving ability, where this Digimon gains security attack +1, so the turn we Digivolve into it, he's going to hit a little bit harder than he normally would, so we could pair this up with other instances of security attack plus to try to burst through a lot of the opponent's security, and normally that would be really, really risky, but he does have a secondary ability that makes it relatively safe, especially if he's well DP boosted. So his secondary ability states that during your turn, this Digimon doesn't activate the security skills of the opponent's option cards when checked. So this turning off the opponent's option cards takes a huge worry off of you when you're trying to swing with this card, because you know no options will be able to kill this card in response. So the only thing that's actually going to be killing this card is Digimon that are higher DP than this, and a well-boosted WarGreymon can easily hit over 15 or 16k, so it's going to be a relatively safe swing when we Digivolve into this card and start swinging away. Even though the security attack +1 will go away, the ability to just not activate the opponent's option cards with this card will persist, and that's just what's making this card really, really good, so that way you could just continuously try to swing away with this card and not worry about any options triggering from the security. And then as far as the last level 6 of the deck, I'm going to be running 2 copies of WarGreymon. So this is the Classic Collection version of WarGreymon, and yes, this is a Dragonkin for MetalGreymon, so that way he can gain the piercing ability as well, but this card is also just a pretty solid WarGreymon to be using. One of the better ones, actually. So what this card is doing is he has the nice when Digivolving ability of Blitz. So Blitz is a very powerful keyword that lets you swing even when the memory goes over onto the opponent's side if this card is able to attack. So that way we could then move a Digimon out of raising, Digivolve it into this version of WarGreymon, and then use the Blitz ability to, well, retain the attack and actually be able to attack onto the opponent, even if the turn would pass normally. So this is just really good at surprising the opponent and trying to deal some additional damage, and this card is really, really hard to stop because it also has a nice when attacking ability, where when this Digimon attacks a player, if you have a Tamer in play, then you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with the blocker ability. So there's lots of very strong blockers in the game, and the fact that this WarGreymon can delete basically almost any of them outside of Craniumon and any Digimon under Craniumon's effect is really, really good, so that way you can ensure your other Digimon are dealing damage and ensure that this card is going to be dealing damage, especially if they have multiple blockers out. The piercing ability coupled with this ability just make it a very hard card to stop for the opponent. And then the last mega of the deck and the only level 7 of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Agumon Bond of Bravery. So we're already running certain cards to just be able to play the Bond of Bravery package, and the Bond of Bravery package is actually a pretty decent package to be using with the deck. So even though it's not a Greymon or an Omnimon, it's still an Agumon, and we do have a little bit of Agumon-based synergies that we could lean into, and this card is still just a very powerful card to be playing around with for a level 7. So the big thing is he evos for 3, so he's a very tempo-efficient level 7 to be Digivolving into. He has 14,000 DP, which is really, really high, especially if we have any ways to DP boost him that are more generic. And then on top of that, he has two very strong abilities. He has a nice when attacking ability where if we have a Tamer in play, we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 13,000 DP or less. So this can take out basically almost any level 6 in the game and even a couple of level 7s, making it just a very strong removal type of ability to be playing around with, on top of the fact that it has another ability where during your turn, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, you get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack. So this is very powerful of a combo play because when you're going to swing, you're potentially going to delete one of the opponent's Digimon, and for deleting the Digimon, you're going to be removing a security off of their security stack before the check even happens. So this is just a really powerful game finisher or potential game finisher because you could try to break all of the opponent's security with the other WarGreymons and then Digivolve into Agumon Bond of Bravery the next turn if any of your WarGreymons are sticking around, swing, delete a Digimon, and potentially swing for lethal. So this is just a very good card to be using for those two abilities alone, on top of its synergy with the Agumon Bond of Bravery package that we're going to be running in the deck. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Red Memory Boost. So Red Memory Boost is a really good consistency card for the deck just because it allows us to look at the top 4 cards of our deck, add 1 red Digimon from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom in any order. So this just allows us to dig for basically almost any card in our deck, even our level 7s, because our level 7 is also a red card, adding to its overall synergy with what we could do with it in the deck. And then on top of that, when this card is used up, it's not going to go to the trash. It's going to sit into the battle area for us to use the delay ability at a later turn to gain 2 memory to make some very powerful follow-up plays with. So this is just a overall fantastic card for any red deck to be using. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Gaia Force because, well, it's Gaia Force. It's one of the best removal cards in the game, so why not run it when we have the deck space too? And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Tai Kamiya. So this is the BT01 version of Tai Kamiya, and this card is acting as the deck's dedicated memory fixing Tamer. So if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll just always hard set us to 3, and this being a Tai Kamiya means that it does allow us to combo this card with the BT06 version of Agumon, allowing us to essentially play it for 3, making it just that much more efficient of a Tamer to be playing. And then on top of that, it also has another ability that we could actually utilize on a lot of different Digimon, where during your turn, all of your red Digimon that has 4 or more Digivolution sources in it gains security attack +1. So we could use this in combination with Alterous mode because we could Digivolve on our level 5s into another level 5. We could use this with our level 6s, and we could even use this with our level 7 because, well, they're all red cards and they all should theoretically have at least 4 inheritable sources in them when we're utilizing this deck correctly. So giving any one of those Digimon an extra security check just makes them that much more threatening to try to close out games and deal additional damage onto the opponent, putting lots of extra pressure onto them. And then the last Tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Tai Kamiya. So this is the BT06 version of Tai Kamiya, and this Tai Kamiya is what's making the deck really, really powerful and allowing us to easily run Bond of Bravery. So what this card is doing natively for the deck, even without Bond of Bravery, is it has a very powerful ability where during your turn, when one of your Digimon with Agumon or Greymon in its name is basically moved out of the racing area into the battle area, then we get to gain a memory and draw a card. So this is just really easy of an ability to use to gain some additional memory and draw extra cards to make the deck that much more consistent and our plays that much more efficient. And then on top of that, what's allowing us to use Bond of Bravery even more efficiently than we normally would is the other main ability where once per turn, we get to Digivolve one of our Agumons into an Agumon Bond of Bravery from our hand by ignoring its level requirement. And if we do, we unfortunately have to trash the top 2 cards of our security stack. Then if we have 1 or more cards in our security, we have to delete the Bond of Bravery at the end of the turn. So it's a really good card to just try to warp up into Bond of Bravery if we could set it up, then swing with Bond of Bravery, deal some damage, and then try to figure out how to close the game. So it's just a really good card to be using with the deck, not only because of its Greymon synergy, but because of all of the synergy that it also has with Bond of Bravery and Bond of Bravery synergy with what the deck is trying to do. And then, like I said, there's just a ton of different options, tech packages, and different things that you could do in the deck to really customize it and make it your own based on the types of cards you want to be playing with and interacting with. So I know I've highlighted quite a lot here, but going over them relatively briefly, you could run the BT05 Agumon to act as a digger to try to dig out your Omnimons and Greymons. You have the promo Agumon, well, the second promo Agumon, to try to DP boost your Greymons to make them that much stronger. You have the promo Guilmon to try to draw some additional cards on a lower level to try to deal some chip damage and gain some benefit for doing so. Then on top of that, you also have the starter deck Agumon to be playing around with as just a generic plus 1000 DP boost for virtually any one of our Digimon. Then on top of that, we have the starter deck Guilmon. It also has a nice ability that interacts with trying to delete the opponent's Digimon by allowing us to draw a card when an opponent's Digimon is deleted. It doesn't even specify by card effect, so if we utilize piercing to just pierce into the opponent's Digimon, then we could delete it and draw a card that way while dealing security damage. So it's just a good card to synergize with the deck, mostly because of its inheritable ability. Then, speaking of other decent inheritable abilities, we also have BT1 Greymon as just another generic Greymon to be using for another generic DP boost. And then, on top of that, we have Agumon to try to act as a solid extra game finisher because, well, hybrids win games because Digivolving on top of a Tamer in Surprise is just that powerful, especially lined up with a memory boost power play. Then we even have Greymon from the starter deck to be playing around with because, well, it's doubling down on trying to delete the opponent's Digimon and all of that synergy, so it's gaining us some memory when we're deleting the opponent's Digimon. Then we even have GeoGreymon from the starter deck also to act as a really good security threat and be another Greymon and potentially remove the opponent's Digimon off the field. And then we have various other red tempo tools that we could be utilizing. We also have Voltramon for basically the same inheritable effect as the starter deck Greymon of giving whatever Digimon he's Digivolving into an extra security damage to try to punch the opponent's security as hard as we possibly can. Then we even do have Rise Greymon to be considering because the inheritable ability of just minusing 2000 coupled with some of our abilities to try to delete the opponent's Digimon that's DP based, it could just increase the overall reach of what those Digimons can use. And then on top of that, the Digiburst ability to try to play our Tamers as efficiently as we possibly can is never a bad thing. And then we have MetalGreymon from the starter deck as just a generic MetalGreymon to be playing around with to try to de-incentivize the opponent from blocking because otherwise we'd gain some additional memory. Then as far as our level 6s, there's just a ton of different very powerful Greymons that you could be running. So you could be running Blitz Greymon to try to de-digivolve the opponent's Digimon, acting as some solid pseudo removal, on top of him natively having the piercing ability. So you could even run Baby Demon with this type of a package to try to increase his DP even more with some other piercing-based synergies. Then we do have Victory Greymon as another card to try to interact with deleting the opponent's Digimon, on top of this also being a Dragonkin, where sometimes these Greymons aren't all Dragonkins, so that's one thing to take advantage of, is the fact that we could use this with the new MetalGreymon to give him the piercing ability. And then we also have various other WarGreymons that we could be using. So we have the BT05 WarGreymon that just tries to delete blockers when we Digivolve into him, and he even has a nice inheritable ability for our level 7s to be using to try to continuously delete the opponent's low-level Digimon. And then we even have the starter deck WarGreymon to think about because, well, just Digivolving up into this card just allows us to have him be very, very powerful and punch the opponent's security all at once. So we could base the deck around him to give him piercing, to give him extra security tax, so that way he could just try to be an absolute menace and nightmare on the opponent's security. And speaking of just another generically decent card that comes from the starter deck, we even have the brand new Shine Greymon coming from the Gallantmon starter deck to be playing as another very solid Greymon to use because he just has two very strong keywords of Security Tac Plus and Piercing, allowing him to deal extra damage consistently. Then us being in red gives us access to a whole bunch of different Omnimons, and we even have Omnimons-based synergy to be playing around with, so you could use just any of the Omnimons relatively efficiently and effectively, depending on how you build the deck. And then we do just have some other very powerful cards to be playing around with in red as a whole, so we do have a Delicate Plan as a really good tech option card. if we want to try to turn off the opponent's option cards in their security, similar to what we're already doing with BT01 WarGreymon. So this just slaps that ability on any Digimon for a single turn, but depending on how you build the deck and if you're trying to punch all of the opponent's security in a single turn, that's all you really need out of the card. And then red just has a whole bunch of different removal options you could use, depending on what you actually want to try to gain and what types of abilities you're looking for out of your removal cards. Then as far as some alternate tamers that you could possibly play, you could think about playing Marcus because he is more directly interacting with Greymons, allowing us to gain a memory back when our Greymon is swinging. Then we do have Nokia that we could play just because, well, we're already playing Agumons, we're already playing Greymons, and this is just that good of a tamer to be using in this type of a deck because she'll reduce the evolution cost of all of those types of Digimon by 1, and she even has a nice on-play ability that lets us play our Agumons, and we have a ton of different Agumons to play that have very powerful on-play abilities, leading to a cascade of different abilities resolving and different ways we could play with our cards. And then if we are going into a more omnimon-based strategy, then we could even consider using Tai and Matt just because, well, this is another really good generic tamer to be playing around with, just because for the opponent having a level 6 in play, us gaining 2 memory at the start of our turn just allows us to make some very powerful follow-up plays with, and it's more directly synergizing with Omnimon because it'll give our Omnimons an extra security attack plus, allowing our Omnimons to hit as hard as they possibly can, and with a slew of different Omnimons to be playing with, and Mega Digimon Fusion combos to also think about, we could just build and customize the deck to be more Omnimon focused. So, like I said, there's just a ton of different cards that you could use to really customize the deck and make it your own, depending on what you're trying to actually gain out of the deck. So, like I said before, this is just my interpretation of a Greymon tribal deck, and the Classic Collection cards definitely add lots of new possibilities. It seems like the Classic Collection cards want to double down and focus on playing our Tai Kamiyas and playing with the Bond of Bravery a little bit more, but these cards could be used in various different ways, depending on the type of cards you're actually going to be utilizing them with, and we do just have lots of different Greymon and Agumon-based cards to be playing around with to really customize the deck and make it your own. And that's what I think is really special about this type of a deck, is just the sheer amount of flexibility that you could do with this type of a deck, and one build isn't necessarily particularly wrong because it's just doubling down on the theme of playing around with your Greymons as efficiently as we possibly can. And there's just, like I said, lots of different cards that we could use to accomplish that goal. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.